Oh la la. Oh.
People like games.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Today we have a very special guest. We have Martin Sahlin of Coldwood Studio and the creator of Unravel. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Very excited. I absolutely loved Unravel and Unravel 2. I actually played the second one with my girlfriend all the way through. So wonderful co-op game, wonderful experience. And let's jump right into it with some gaming questions. And so I know as someone who works in video games, you do not have the most time to be playing them because I'm sure everybody asks you that all the time. But with the time that you do have, what is the game that you're playing most right now?
I think that's interesting, actually, because everyone always said that I don't have time to play games. I have all the time to play games, but I just do other stuff. Climbing is my game now. I've spent the entire summer just climbing, going around everywhere in the countryside around here, finding interesting things to climb. So that's why I don't have time to play video games, not because of work, because I do other stuff.
Does the other things inform it in a similar way? Like, so
I mean, it's kind of video gamey in a way, definitely, like problem solving and all that stuff. But I guess the video game I've been playing, I tried the Assassin's Creed one, Valhalla. Didn't particularly like it, but now I just realized that. Oh, actually, I'm wearing the shirt. I kickstarted, or no, not kickstarted, some other thing, crowdfunded, Psychonauts. So I'm going to download that tonight and try that.
Psychonauts too?
Yeah.
We just actually did a little episode on it, and so it's a super interesting story behind that as well. Do you have like a particular creator that is in the industry that you're a big fan of their work? So say like it'd be like Tim Schafer. Does anyone's name come up in particular behind the game that you're like, oh, Psychonauts 2 looks great, or as someone who's also a creative director, you're like, oh yes, my fellow directors, of course.
I mean, I don't know, actually. I mean, I guess I'm sort of, I used to be a really big fan of everything that game company did, and then also like Ueda-san, just like all the Shadow of the Colossus stuff from back in the days. So I was always like following what those people were doing for a while, but I don't know. I guess I'm just not like
as
waist deep into the industry.
Well, that's a very interesting one, because that was actually going to be one of my questions, which was so if someone is not waist deep in gaming, everyone I've talked to has sort of made a life of it, right? What is it about video games that make you prefer them to other mediums, or say, are you a fan of film instead? However, the ability to do something more interactive in gaming is why you do it as a career per se, which doesn't make it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's the unrealized potential is kind of the big draw for me. I think that games have this potential to just really like connect with people and just foster empathy, all these things, like because you're actively participating in it, you're not just consuming media. Like could create a deeper understanding, like could like create deeper emotional responses with people, and I think that maybe it isn't really done as much as it should be, or I think there's room for more, and I think that's why games are interesting to me. I think they could do more than what they are doing.
That's an interesting question, because I actually went back and watched some of your interviews so as not to be a little bit redundant, and I thought one of the more interesting things that you mentioned was creating games to create purpose and meaning, and create a deeper connection with the player. So whoever's watching this and listening to this, you'll see some of the Unravel game footage going in. Now, how do you create a deeper connection through that game? Do you think it has to be, because I remember you mentioned gameplay being more like an interesting automated portion of it that's fun in and of itself, then do you build the story around the gameplay mechanism, and do you have like a disconnect you're trying to overcome? How have you approached trying to maybe overcome some of those? Is it narratively? Is it through mechanics? Is it through cooperative, functions like what you did in Unravel 2?
I think Unravel 2 is a pretty good example of just trying to convey emotion through through gameplay and features, because that whole thing about being constantly connected to someone and have that other someone be like your most fun toy, but also your most trusted lifeline, is
100%.
kind of something that I think worked out really well. That like it's supposed to be a game about just being completely wrecked and then restarting and rebooting and trying to just like form a new bond with someone. And I think that sort of landed pretty well.
Absolutely.
You kind of get that sense that it's like it's really fun to play with each other, but you also always have that safety of a buddy that can save you if you fall.
Yeah, 100%. And the amount of times I'd be like jumping somewhere, I'm like, I'm gonna fall, and it just stops there because you're still connected. And some of the sort of like the restringing in mechanic was super useful a lot of times. But so then then just to build off of that question, secondly, you mentioned the narrative and the stories and the manner in which you prefer a more subjective version of storytelling, where you don't say lay out the entirety of what you're trying to do. You allow the environment and the interactions to do the storytelling. One, are you a postmodernist? And two, joke aside, do you think it's a bit more difficult to create that deeper connection if the story is subjective and left to like the player or the listeners, or like a movie that ends on the like Inception, if this is a spoiler for anyone, if you've seen the ending, does that create a deeper connection, or does that cut short the connection because people want to be led to a story ending?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is that in video games you can't count on a friendly audience. Like when you're consuming other types of media, if you're reading a book or watching a film or whatever, you're into it. You're expecting the story. That's why you're there. That's why you came. And so you have a very receptive, like friendly audience that they want to go on this journey that you're taking them on. But in a video game, you don't know that that's the case. They might be, but they also might not be. I think the one of the most like clear examples of that I can think of was when we were trying a bunch of VR games in the office a couple of years ago. And whenever there's a cutscene in a VR game, but you still have control, invariably people do stupid things. So there was this game, there was like some kind of cool gangster thing, which like Godfather set up with a big desk with a big important mafioso talking about cool stuff, and meanwhile someone's trying to poke him in the eye with a cigar, because that's what you can do when you have control, and people like doing stupid things. 100%. So like you can't count on the audience being with you, and that's why I like to just put the story hooks there so that people can seek them out if they want to, but if they don't want to, they don't get in the way. And also, like, you never wind up in the situation where everything just feels stupid because people are goofing around, but the story is trying to be serious, and there's just this clash and just ends up wrong. So that's why I like a more like subdued version of storytelling.
Do you find, even from your experience, any particular games types, whether it's a platformer or an open world, is more amenable to that sort of connect. Because you were right. Because I was going to actually ask if that was when I was writing some questions down yesterday, whether you thought open world games were able to do that same sort of connection. But as someone who's playing Ghost of Tsushima right now, it's a little tough because, like you said, in the middle of the game, I could run around, do all these silly things throughout. But then when the storyline goes in, it sort of it automatically handholds you through the motion, right? You cut it off, and now it started the cutscene, and now the cutscene we doing. But like you said, the immersion does break the second that cutscene ends, and I'm back here in my open world, and I can just go around slashing random things. Do you find, maybe as you said, subtle? Do you find the size of the game or the type of game to be effective of that as well?
I mean, I guess there must be some reason why all the sort of clever indie story games are platformers. But then again, I don't think that it's that there's necessarily any kind of limit for the format. I think
at least resources.
I think there's stuff like A Short Hike, for instance, which is more like an open world game, but still like has this great mood and just atmosphere in it. That's a good example of that. Doesn't have to be a platformer necessarily to just be nice.
Do you find VR, like you were mentioning, that's supposed to be a push into immersion? Do you find that to be maybe the next stepping stone in the storytelling in games that you were searching for? With your smile, with that, I feel like that's maybe not.
I think this is the type of thing that you're probably not supposed to say like business wise, but personally, I hate VR. I think it's terrible. It's awful. It's everything that I don't want. But the thing
that's
is,
funny.
like,
I have an Oculus sitting here, and there's certain parts of it that are interesting, but I didn't see the gaming aspect.
Yeah, I think absolutely. For me, it's like I don't even like first-person games. I like having a character that I can connect with. I like having something that anchors me in the game. I don't like being just a camera. I don't being.
If the anchoring is done, do you not lose interest? Because people want that first person because they want to be the character. They don't want to choose, even if it's a customizable character. If they're seeing someone, they're like, well, that's not me. And then VR is supposed to fix that.
I get why people, and I think maybe it's just something that's just fundamentally different about how different people just work. But for me, it's the exact opposite. Like, I don't want to be myself because I'm myself all the time. I want to be someone completely different.
Absolutely.
And I connect more with the character if I can see it. And also, like, as a game developer, I think it's like I can communicate things through the character. I can communicate how that character feels by how it moves, by how it looks. I don't need the cutscene where it speaks. I don't need text. I don't need anyone to tell me, because you can immediately see that the character is scared if it moves like it's scared.
Absolutely. That actually gave me one of the questions I also had, which is that you're saying the body movement and the design. So for the character Yarny, which incredible character, I don't even know where you would have begun to sort of dream that up. But when you were putting together, one of the things was how simplified and how minimalistic the design was, and the question of trying to relay emotions. Do you still think that keeping the design minimal and focusing on those body languages was better, or if you had maybe added voices or something of that manner? That response of yours remind me a bit of the creator of Calvin and Hobbes, if you're familiar, the comic. He never wanted a plushie of Hobbes to be created because he's like, you'll ruin the fantasy of it. It's supposed to be an imaginary thing. Did you feel like a version of that when you're putting together? No, if we add too many features, you're going to take away the sort of magic of this character.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a lot of discussion about that. There was a heated discussion about that, but I was quite adamant that less really is more in this case. Because there was just like, how can we express things when, I don't know, when they don't speak? And and all kinds of discussion about all kinds of things. But I've always felt that we should stick with the simple things. And I guess in some ways it's about also like choosing your battles. Like you pick the things that you know that you can do well instead of trying to do all the things. So that's actually that's one side of it. But then there's also just this whole thing about people love mystery. People love not having all the answers given to them, but feeling like they can find the answers if they go looking for them. So that's why it just resonates more with people when the character doesn't give everything away right away.
Absolutely.
And it also feels like whatever you see there becomes more yours. Like it's up to you how you interpret it, and it just feels more genuine that way.
It becomes more of a direct connection to the character, and so then as you. But also
there's definitely like the kind of uncanny valley thing as well. Like if you do if the more you do, the better you have to do it.
Yeah, 100%. And so I mean, but there's also the what's the line between basic and streamlined sophistication in minimalist, etc. So then you said like, so now you have this minimalistic character that you've created, right? And you have this sort of vision. Now you want to tell the story through the backdrops and the environment. Now, how does that get constructed on the top? Because I do have a gameplay about the question, but say now you have your character. What was the first thought process of, okay, I want to do something with the real world background or environment, and how did those two pieces connect? Because I know you were in the woods when you were sort of putting together Yarny, when you were taking the pictures, and now you're a climber as well. It was all of those inspirations sort of, no, I want a real world aesthetic here, even though Yarny is a bit fantastical of a creature.
Yeah, I think it was a weird design process, because it was led by I like to say karma sometimes. It was very intuitive. So what I did was basically, since the whole process started like that, I wanted it to continue like that, to just go with whatever felt right and pick the things that felt inspiring. And I think one of the things that made that initial burst of creativity so good was that it was, this sounds corny, but it was surrounded by love in a way. Like totally. I was out there with my family, and I was in a place that I think is really beautiful and that I love going to. And like, you're in that environment that means something to you, and you're with people that means something to you, and that makes you feel good about what you're creating. So I felt like the whole thing should be about picking things that are actually like important to us and trying to build off of that. So that's why like all the scenery is not necessarily trying to depict real places, but they're trying to portray how a lot of real places feel to us. Absolutely. So we were essentially just picking memories, nice memories, difficult memories, but important memories, and weaving a story out of that. So I created this fictional character, this old woman, and figured that the whole game is essentially going through her memories and sorting her stuff out for the first Unravel game. Anyway.
Absolutely, because I was saying the second one sort of like a series of vignettes related to exactly what you were saying, which are different pictures of memories, sort of like a passing feeling. So you're sort of running through their memories in the background while they're sort of up front. So you take that context in if you're paying attention, but it's not going to tell you, hey, look at what's happening over here.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you evolved it into, like you were saying, that story. How did you focus on evolving the story for the second one? Or was it sort of, hey, let's just do, like you said, more of the same, better, right? You know how it is when you do something incredible, everyone's like, that's amazing, do it again, but better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a difficult one. The thing is, I was in a terrible place after the first Unravel.
How did that work of love lead that? Yeah.
What?
How did the work of love lead to that? You're like, I love this project. It was awful when it ended.
It was a lot of things. It was exhausting because I was pulling a lot from myself. And it was also exhausting because a lot of personal stuff happened. And it was just like a perfect storm of being overworked and exhausted and depressed and just really, really struggling with absolutely everything. So I was crushed by the end of the first game. Actually, it was quite interesting because we announced it about 9 months or so before we released it. Mm-hmm. And I think those 9 months were crucial to me because it was such a mood boost. Because on some level, I knew before we showed it that the game was good. Yeah, I wasn't worried about showing it off because I knew that people would like it. But I hadn't really anticipated just how much people would like it and how enthusiastic and friendly and just like great people would be about it.
How much pressure did that
add? No pressure, just it just kept me going.
Absolutely.
So that's why the story in Unravel 2 is basically about a reboot. Like, even though you're completely destroyed, you start off the game adrift in a storm with all your bonds torn and you're alone and you're messed up and you are crushed. But then all it takes is like a little spark to get going again. And then like you can make new bonds, make new friends. So that was like, it wasn't really that important to try to ramp up the quality or whatever. I wasn't really into that much. The only thing I wanted to do was just tell that story that no matter how dark things get, you can still turn the lights back on.
Nothing is permanently broken. The little ending photo, absolutely beautiful, very poetic. Which actually I was gonna say, I was like, if you're not waist deep in video games, do you think poetry, literature, or film is the best means of storytelling for you personally?
I think they all have their merits. I'm into all of them.
Exactly. So if you guys are waiting for a good answer on that one, there it is. But jokes aside, now to the mechanics of the gameplay, did you have to evolve? Actually, firstly, what was the inspiration? Because you said you wanted a singular gameplay mechanic that's sort of interesting and fun and really smooth. And in this case, it was a string and the swinging for Unravel and then Unravel 2. But was it, or how much was that swinging mechanic inspired by Spider-Man 2, the game?
Not at all, actually. I think it's just common sense that grappling hooks are fun.
Yeah, it's super fun. I was playing it. I was like, so did he play Spider-Man? I gotta talk.
The first rule of video games, like, get a grappling hook.
Absolutely. Quick movement and the fluidity of it. So I told myself I would ask that.
For me, it's very much about you can't have the feeling of lightness without a feeling of weight.
Yeah.
And you want the feeling of lightness, but and I think just like the swinging thing is just like the perfect sort of way to communicate that. I think Yarny is one of my favorite games, just control-wise, because it has this, like, you can fly, but you're not weightless. Mm-hmm. Because if you were weightless, then the flying would be meaningless. But now when you're sliding down a hill and then you just launch and you just keep each other going by singing to each other, so you can just extend your air time as much as possible. Like it's wonderful.
Absolutely. I mean, that feeling, that exactly what you're talking about. I mean, that was the first time I actually felt in the God of War game, when you throw the axe. I don't know if you've played it. You feel it. And so even now with haptic feedback, I feel like that would be a great opportunity if their studio in the future ends up in that sort of space, to definitely try to take advantage of that, because I feel like that'd be super interesting. And then I guess now, just even related to that, how did you evolve the gameplay for singular to co-op? Because to a degree, you don't need two people.
Yeah,
if you're playing multiplayer.
It was to begin with, like the initial pitch for Unravel 2 was super dark. It was incredibly dark, because it was essentially supposed to be like at first like a commentary on how the world fucking sucks when you're alone.
It's true.
So it would basically be terrible when you were playing by yourself, and then kind of fun when you were connecting with someone else.
Like Overcooked.
But then we realized that it was really hard to do online multiplayer, so we didn't do that. Like the initial thing was to try to build lasting bonds, to try to find people online that you actually like could develop that playfulness and trust with. So it was it was like a Tinder analogy, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, online co-op in that game would have been hilarious because of how much you have to be like connected with the other person, especially on the movements. Did you guys try it for like a day or two and you're like, no, it's gonna lead to a lot of rage? We can't.
We realized pretty soon that okay, this is gonna be a nightmare. So then we just figured, just how can we still keep that connection part and make it meaningful. And then it turned out that it's like it's a co-op game, even if you play it to play yourself.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, playing with your other side, both sides of your brain, if you're playing by yourself.
Yeah.
Which does make me think, what was the like most difficult thing to actually implement, whether it's mechanically, whether it's visually, whether it's marketing, finding a model? Like, what was the most difficult part of the game, and the one that when you guys executed, or when the team executed, was super excited? Like, yes, I didn't think we'd manage this, but look at us, we got both these stringy people in.
I think that's an interesting question, but also I have to give a disappointing answer, because I think a lot of times, I don't know if it's like this at all studios, but I think I suspect that it might be, because a lot of times it's not that you work towards the goal, and then you meet the goal and it's fireworks. It's more like you're constantly working on something, and then things get gradually more and more like less and less shit along the 100%. Journey.
What was
so it's difficult to get to those points where it feels like, yeah, we nailed it, until the game is actually
patchwork. You have the patchwork framework, of course, because you have the sort of lateral, but what was the one thing where you're like, even the minimalist, you're like, I'm gonna drag this to the finish line and we're gonna make this happen? And when you guys do it, you're like, it might not have been necessary to do it, but we were gonna do it as a team because we wanted to. So it's not like the end of the celebration, but even one of the side pivots that you guys are
absolutely. But I mean, the obvious answer is like all the yarn mechanics, because all the physics that go on there are
I'm gonna say.
So that was fancy. Our lead programmer Jacob is very good at that stuff. Also,
I don't know where it begins.
Very relieved for the second game that we didn't have to do a yarn that was like a mile long. We only have about one screen of yarn, but that's still super complex when like all the different edge cases, when it's wrapped around things and one is climbing on it and the other one is trying to run away. And it's just, there's so much going on with the yarn that's, I'm very impressed that it's turned out as well as it did.
It just looks real. The physics of the movement of the yarn, of everything about it. It's incredible. Especially, for a smaller studio. I guess now is sort of start getting towards the end of these questions for you as well. What, as an independent developer, I know you had a lot of backing from EA early on. I guess even not even how do you get the backing of a big studio like that? What is it about, the Sweden, Norway area, because I had the chance to speak with Ingvo Hopen as well on the show, that creates so many game developers? And, it's a very focused industry out there, or a growing one. And not only that, all of the games tend to take a more artistic and personal sort of scale in their executions. So they're visually stunning normally, and they have platformer mechanics. Is there something in the water out in those Nordic countries? But actually, what is it, a cultural thing?
I think it's a multi-layer answer, but I think part of it is it lies pretty far back. Like when I was a kid, I'm old, but when I was a kid, my mom, she used to work for a while with this in this government program, where essentially the Swedish government decided that we think home computers are going to be a thing, and we want people to have home computers. And this was like 80s, so most people didn't. So they created all these like subsidies that made computers cheaper, and they had like places where you could go to try on computers just so that people could see that they are kind of cool. And my mom worked in one of those. Actually, our old office was just next door to that place. So I could remember like going there when I was 7 years old and just like trying to draw with Mac Paint on the first like original Macintosh. And I think that sort of created like that laid the foundation for future generations of people who have just like always grown up with computers. And we invested quite heavily in infrastructure so that like people had internet early on, like good internet early on.
Absolutely.
So there's always been this sense that, computers are cool and you can do cool things with them. And it's access for everyone as well, so that you don't have to be like rich to get the good stuff, but it's achievable. And I think that laid a very, very good foundation. And then I think more recently, we have these kind of creative hubs. Like we have, like in Jönköping, you have a school that's very good. So you have a lot of like young people with crazy ideas and who just want to do cool stuff. So I think it's that and like a general just kind of, when you live in a small and sort of remote place, I guess you get used to doing stuff yourself.
100%.
Like we had a pretty fun music scene here in my city, like a while ago when I was younger. Anyway, that was essentially like, no bands are ever going to come here and play, so we're going to have to play ourselves.
100%.
And I think that sort of mentality carries over to games as well. That it's just like, well, no one's going to do it for us, so let's just do it ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think, even as you're saying, that access to the technology on the earlier end and sort of opening it up to everybody and not making it a rich versus poor thing, because here in America, there is much more of a division socioeconomically when it comes to technology, especially technology over here, which is like no one really gets access to it early, especially in game development. But it makes more sense. I feel like a lot of that, the government grants, programs, et cetera, allow companies to exist and do things to find that market, to find that big studio that's like, hey, I think what you're working on is interesting, that hopefully we can do sometime soon here in America. But now wrapping it up to the end, because I know you have extra time, but I also know I've already taken up a lot of yours. Do you have a mobile version of the game coming out anytime soon, or have you found that it is not touch mechanics oriented, or are you just going to let them do it over at Xbox?
I would love to, honestly. The problem with being a fairly small studio who's working on their own tech all the time is that whatever isn't the thing that we're currently working on is like,
it's for the future.
You can't. It would take us days to just get the old game running, and then there's just like not enough people to just fiddle with it and try to make it work. Personally, I think it's like we're at the stage with mobile devices where you can actually make games that look good and play well, and just like I mean, you could connect any kind of controller to an iPad and just.
So you could play Unravel 2 on mobile here through the X Cloud, and so you could use, but you're still using the controller. But it is, coming to mobile in a way that makes a lot of sense when it comes to studio.
Yeah. But personally, like I think my philosophy is that I love it when everyone plays games. Like one of the things that I'm most pleased about with Unravel is hearing, like, I don't know, my friend's neighbor, who's a 60-year-old lady, got a PlayStation so she could play Unravel. That's like, how cool is that?
It opens up new dynamics, new people, and that's the best, because anyone, again, and I would agree, and that's why I love it. So I love the chance to speak to someone who created a game like that, like you, because I could be like, hey, new Call of Duty's out. That I'm like, yeah, but there's a market for it. There's a particular person they're going for. It's not trying to expand outwards into finding people who could be touched by this medium, like you said, but maybe aren't being found. I guess, are you guys working on anything new over at your studio? Is there an Unravel 3 coming out?
I mean, we're always working on something, but
you heard it here first. Non-answer.
So we'll see. It's going to be a while until we show anything. But I think that's the luxury that we've earned with the Unravel games, that we can 100%. Take our time.
Are you guys looking to? I guess that sort of answers the question. So you heard it here. There's a game that will come out eventually when the tech's right and the story is right and everything else is right. So if you're looking, are they working on something? The answer is yes, they are. And then now, just a finalizing question that I love to ask everyone. Actually, did not send this to you prior. What is one novel, story, poem, cartoon, comic, etc., that you loved, that you would love to see adapted or made into a video game? So we've had like Ed, and Eddie. We've had a couple of animes. We've had a couple of different answers. What's it for you?
Based on visuals alone, I would say Coraline.
Oh, very nice.
But yeah, there's a lot. But yeah, that was the first one.
Coraline comes to mind. I'm a huge Nightmare Before Christmas fan and stop motion fan. So if you have not seen that movie, go check it out. It's wonderful. It did not get the praise it deserved on a wider realm. Great answer. I mean, honestly, I feel like one of the reasons I loved Unravel so much. I love stop motion, and there was something very stop motion-esque about the dissonance between the little Yarny character and the slight background difference. So it looked like those stop motion characters moving around. The same way I saw those pictures that you took of the Yarnies in the woods going around everywhere. I'm like, who made a Yarny and took all these pictures? And then I was watching one of your old interviews, and I saw that. And just one more thing, was the title Unravel inspired by a Bjork song?
Yes,
nice.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It was, I've told that story a million times. So, but it was
exactly a story that you haven't told.
What?
A story that you haven't told a million times, and that I actually wanted to ask first and didn't, and should have. Can you explain the hand tattoo? Because I saw it in the interviews, and I was so curious.
The hand tattoo. Yes, it's when I was 18, I was sharing a flat with some friends, and I was the skinny vegan kid who was into punk rock and straight edge, drug free, all that stuff, and all of the others were long-haired metal dudes who were into devil worship and stuff. And one of them had tattooed cool bones on his hand, and he was just basically teasing me about it. Said, you could never do it because no, you couldn't handle it, it just hurts too much. So it's like male bravado. And
but it looks awesome.
like, it's not that bad really, but then I didn't want to do something that was sort of in their type of aesthetic. I was something more in my type of aesthetic, and I might have had a minor crush on Madonna as well. So,
but hey, it looked awesome, and
so I did it because someone said that I couldn't.
So next time someone, so I bet you won't tell me about Unravel 3. But jokes aside, that's awesome. That's hilarious. I actually meant to start that from the beginning because I kept seeing it in the interviews. I'm like, why is no one asking this question? It looks really cool. I guess you're not supposed to ask the tattoo questions of like, what does it mean? But
it was actually kind of fun because it was one of those things where you just roll with it, because the guy that I went to was this like old biker guy, and I'm not sure he was sober at the time. So I kind of explained to him what I wanted, and then we just started. And I didn't have any idea what it was going to turn out like. So it was just like I was looking as he was working and say, okay, yeah. So that's how it's going to be
permanent. This is going to be forever. That's funny. Well, have you ever looked down at it and every time you look at it, you remember the story and you're like, or does it sort of it's just there at this point?
It's mostly just there, but it also I like it. It feels like a spell in a way.
It does. It has. That's what I say. You look like the a God of War character. Like if you haven't played the new one, just all the tattoos on the hands. I'm like, it's interesting, Nordic. But that would be all. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for taking the time. I had a great conversation. I hope you did as well.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Awesome. And then I hope we can get you back again in the future when you do or don't release anything that you are or not working on. But anyway, we'll see. Thank you again. And hopefully we have you back on the show in the future.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem.